and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I'm Catherine Hadro in our Washington, D.C. studio. Thanks for joining us. In this week's show, a former Irish Prime Minister says pro-life doctors should not be forced to refer for abortions. A new book calls on pro-lifers to embrace the concept of human dignity. We speak with the author. And this.
When you're open to life, you're open to loss. And people don't always prepare you for that necessarily.
We introduce you to an apostolate caring for mothers of miscarried and stillborn souls. But first, the Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to vote next week on whether or not to confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. We go to Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. First off, how do you think your committee will vote next week on Judge Kavanaugh?
Based upon the questions that were asked for the 2 days that Kavanaugh showed his true abilities to be on the Supreme Court, I expect the vote's going to be 11-10. We'll have the debate in committee and the vote, which I presume will be 11-10, on September the 20th.
Good to know. And the hearings did get pretty rowdy at times, Senator. Judge Kavanaugh's children couldn't even be in the room. What do you make of all the disruption, particularly from Planned Parenthood and Women's March activists?
Well, I believe that you look at what went on, and I think maybe the people that were raising the questions and a lot of the showboating that went on, that they showed that they didn't lay a hand on Kavanaugh. So during Wednesdays and Thursdays, there was about 27 hours that Kavanaugh was before the American people, and they found a person that was truly going to do what a justice of the Supreme Court ought to do, leave their personal views out of it. They aren't going to be a policymaker. They're going to interpret the law the way Congress passed it, base their decision on the facts of the case and the law or the Constitution, and leave their own personal views out. And that's what everybody expects of a justice. So he showed that he is, well, you know, some people say he has a reputation for being a judge's judge. In other words, like a mentor to other people. He showed what mentoring qualities he has, being a teacher. Well, he's also been a professor of the law. So I think that his high qualifications are going to make certain his approval by the United States Senate.
For our viewers, Senator, can you give more context about how judicial nominees talk about cases that might come before the Supreme Court, and particularly, for the sake of our viewers, cases that involve Roe v. Wade?
Okay, well, I think he made very clear that following what justice of the Supreme Court always does in almost every area, there's sometimes that they overturn what you call precedent, but the longer the precedent's been there, the more apt it is to hold. And then there's a second opinion dealing with Roe v. Wade that would indicate that it's pretty much a precedent of the Supreme Court that's going to be difficult to change. But I think what he's trying to say in this environment is that there's a certain amount of leeway within Roe v. Wade and the way the courts have interpreted it now, and there's areas where states can legislate certain areas within the Roe v. Wade issue. So you can have 50 different states approaching the issue within their what they can do under the Constitution in different ways. And he would not say to anybody, and he shouldn't say to anybody, how he would rule on some case that might come up 10 years down the road or even 10 months down the road, because you got to look at that case separately from anything else and judge it by what the Constitution requires. And that's what he's going to do, and that's what that's why the people that were trying to catch him on Roe v. Wade, that he might be absolutely opposed to it, He took the Ginsburg standard. And remember, Justice Ginsburg said in 1993, when she was there, when somebody said, well, how are you going to rule in this area or that area? She says there's not going to be any predictions, any hints. There's not going to be anything that I'm going to tell you how I might rule 10 years down the road, because I don't know what the facts of the case are. And then Justice Kagan, about 6 or 7 years ago, when she was before our committee, said it a little bit different way, but took the point of view. It would be wrong for a person who's supposed to give impartial justice and make a judgment that you were going to be anything other than the law and the facts.
That is very important context. Thank you, Senator. My last question to you is, what would you say to your Democratic colleagues from red states about Kavanaugh ahead of the vote?
Yeah, they ought to be voting for him, and they shouldn't be listening to their leader, who has been pounded by a lot of more liberal people than evidently Schumer is, and I didn't know they existed. But they said, if you can't keep all 49 votes together, then you shouldn't be leader of the Democratic caucus. And the way I see it is, we're elected by the people of our particular state, Iowa in my case. But wherever else they're elected, either in a red or blue state, they ought to be representing the people of their state. And I would expect in most of these red states that people find Kavanaugh very favorable to be on the Supreme Court. So they'd be making a very dramatic mistake by voting against him.
Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Another senator on the Senate Judiciary Committee is Dianne Feinstein of California. The highest Democratic ranking member of the committee made a serious factual error in the Kavanaugh hearing. Take a listen to this.
In the 1950s and 60s, the 2 decades before Roe, deaths from illegal abortions in this country ran between 200,000 and 1.2 million. That's according to the Guttmacher Institute. I don't want to go back to those death totals in this country.
Here's what the senator gets wrong. The statistic Feinstein just cited are the number of abortions, not the number of maternal deaths within those decades. Here for more fact-checking is Mallory Quigley, Vice President of Communications for the Susan B. Anthony List. Mallory, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Catherine.
Can you respond to Senator Feinstein's error in citing that 2003 Guttmacher Institute study inflating the number of maternal deaths?
Absolutely. Well, the lies that were flying back and forth last week during these hearings were truly breathtaking. Need to start by saying that the Guttmacher Institute was set up as the research arm of Planned Parenthood. So they have an agenda to support the nation's largest abortion business with these statistics. But the number of deaths, alleged deaths from illegal abortion prior to Roe versus Wade, this is a myth that has been busted time and again. Several prominent pro-life people who actually are converts to the movement, had spent time in the abortion lobby, have come out and said that that number was completely fabricated. Most notably, viewers may know Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who was a co-founder of NARAL, later had a profound conversion to Christianity, to Catholicism, and also to the pro-life movement. And he admitted that those numbers were just completely fake.
It seems that this is a fear-mongering tactic. Did we see any more instances of that within the hearing or even within our culture during this past 2 weeks?
Oh gosh, I mean, the abortion lobby has really got people into a frenzy over this nominee and these hearings. I think that the biggest lie that we've seen peddled by the abortion lobby in these recent weeks, certainly in the outbursts during the hearings. We had some protesters at an event that we were doing last week in Alabama. It's this lie that American women need abortion on demand in order to be successful. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's an exploitation, it is a denigration of everything that it means to be a woman.
Absolutely. And speaking of the abortion lobby, let's take a look at this exchange that's being misrepresented between Senator Ted Cruz and Judge Kavanaugh.
Question was, first, was this a substantial burden on their religious exercise? And it seemed to me quite clearly it was. It was a technical matter of filling out a form In that case, they said filling out the form would make them complicit in the provision of the abortion-inducing drugs that they were, as a religious matter, objected to.
Is what Judge Kavanaugh just said inaccurate?
Is perfectly accurate, Catherine. He's basically restating what he wrote in his dissent in the Priests for Life versus HHS case that was before the D.C. Circuit Court. And he's saying that Priests for Life and other religious groups saw the permission slip that they basically had to sign with the HHS mandate as being a gross violation of their religious liberty. So he's simply stating the facts.
Speaking of that case involving Priests for Life, what else can we pull from how Judge Kavanaugh ruled there that might reflect how he would rule as a justice on the Supreme Court?
Right. It was a 3-judge panel on the D.C. Circuit Court, of which Judge Kavanaugh is a larger part, and they refused twice to hear Priests for Life's arguments against the HHS mandate. And basically, Judge Kavanaugh wrote a dissent from that opinion, not to hear the case in a full court. He wanted to let Priests for Life have their day in court to make their arguments about why this is a violation of religious liberty.
Mallory Quigley, Vice President of Communications for the Susan B. Anthony List, thanks again for being back with us.
It's always a pleasure to be with you.
The Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to vote next week on whether or not to confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. And the following week, the rest of the senators will cast their vote. It cannot be overstated how pivotal of a moment this is for the pro-life movement. If Kavanaugh is confirmed, it would mean having a justice who believes in the Constitution and the right to life. Kavanaugh could be the deciding vote in a possible future case that could overturn the Roe v. Wade decision. That brings us to this week's call to action. Tell your senators to confirm Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Here's how you can do that. Simply go to prolifeweekly.com. Type in some of your basic information so we can craft the message to be for your specific senators. And then click Submit at the bottom of the screen. Kavanaugh, a devout Catholic, has served on the D.C. Circuit Court for more than a decade. During his time on the bench, he forcefully rejected the ACLU's assertion of a new constitutional right of abortion on demand for illegal immigrant minors in U.S. custody. And in the case Priests for Life versus HHS, Kavanaugh refused to apply the HHS contraceptive mandate to religious entities. Let's put the pressure on the Senate to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the High Court. Again, the significance here cannot be overstated. Confirming Kavanaugh is a critical step towards possibly overturning the Roe v. Wade decision. Go to prolifeweekly.com to tell your senators to confirm Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh. We go now to pro-life headlines from around the globe. Former Irish Prime Minister John Bruton says pro-life doctors should not be forced to refer women for abortions. According to a report in the Irish Times, Bruton made the public comments on Saturday, saying he feared pro-life doctors would be targeted by those who wanted to catch them out. This comes as a bill proposal in Ireland would require doctors with a conscientious objection to performing abortions make referrals for the procedure. An official Chinese state media outlet denies any imminent change to the country's national two-child policy. The denial follows media speculation the change was being considered in response to China's rapidly aging population. China's former one-child policy was expanded in 2015 to a limit of 2 children per family. And the parents of Alfie Evans have welcomed a baby boy named Thomas 4 months after their firstborn son's death. Kate James and Tom Evans told ITV's This Morning they had to wait 4 days to see if baby Thomas had the same condition as Alfie. Alfie died just shy of 2 years old in April after a British hospital withheld a ventilator and food and water. He had a mysterious degenerative neurological condition that doctors never properly diagnosed. Turning now to our next story, a new book calls on Christians to be part of a new movement the author calls a human dignity revolution. We're joined now by that author. Daniel Darling is the Vice President for Communications for the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. He's also author of the new book, The Dignity Revolution, Reclaiming God's Rich Vision for Humanity. Daniel, welcome to the show.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's our joy. Daniel, first off, you wrote recently in USA Today that even if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, and even if abortion were to be made illegal in all 50 states, that our pro-life work has just begun. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, and to be clear, if Roe versus Wade was overturned and abortion was made illegal in all 50 states, we'd be overjoyed. I mean, we'd be dancing, and Baptists don't even dance. But I do think that our work is just beginning, because abortion, while it may be one of the greatest threats to human dignity, it's far from the only one. And so what I do in that piece and in this book is urge pro-lifers to apply this great moral ethic that every human life from conception has infinite value and worth to a wide range of issues beyond abortion.
Do you see abortion as the greatest threat to a human's dignity?
I do, because a society that can't protect the least defensible among us, you have to ask the question, what can we protect? And a society that is willing to discard humans at their most vulnerable has serious problems.
And that really is key, to see these unborn people as vulnerable and as people. How did you, Daniel, begin to see the unborn as the most vulnerable? What shaped that vision for you?
You know, for me, it was a variety of things. You know, growing up as a Christian and learning the Bible, learning Christian theology. But more personally, you know, when I was 5, our parents adopted my brother. And so as just a 5-year-old, I remember just going to the adoption agency and picking him up and seeing how vulnerable he was. And I always felt like God had put me on this earth to be his protector. And then I also saw my mom, after my parents had me, go through 7 miscarriages and at least 2 stillbirths. And seeing my parents mourn the loss of each one of these, not as a fetus or a clump of cells, but as a human life, as a baby, that they felt each loss intimately, and by extension I did as well. And then of course, just learning in science that about the way that humans are conceived, and just the way that babies have feeling and heartbeats and have their own DNA, and just seeing just how precious every human life, as King David says in Psalm 139, that each one is knitted together in the mother's womb by God.
Daniel, you mentioned that you are Baptist. We're here on the Global Catholic Network. How do you see the pro-life issue being one where evangelicals and Catholics can come together? I know that your group, ERLC, is very outspoken about the pro-life issue.
Well, I think it's great the way that Baptists and Catholics work together on this issue. You know, we have many theological disagreements. I think it's great the way that we work together. And every year I come to the March for Life, and I'm just amazed at the way that the Catholic community has come together to stand for the least of these. As a Baptist, I've been shaped by Catholic social teaching that's helped inform our positions. I do think that we should retain our distinctions. Catholics should be Catholics and Baptists should be Baptists, and bring that to the table. But I think when we work together to fight assaults on human dignity like abortion, we have just a more rich and robust public witness.
Well, I'm grateful that we can work together on this issue and continue to speak the truth about the dignity of the human life. Daniel Darling, author of The Dignity Revolution, Reclaiming God's Rich Vision for Humanity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here with you.
When we come back,
We hadn't experienced loss in a personal capacity like that.
a mother who has experienced the grief and loss of miscarriage shares how one group helped bring her peace. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Hadro. For this week's Speak Out, we take a look at a recent opinion piece about assisted suicide in the New York Times. The New York Times writer Sarah Lyall recently wrote an op-ed titled, "The Last Thing Mom Asked." Her first line reads, "I am about to kill my mother." Lyall explains her 82-year-old mother is suffering with stage 4 lung cancer and wants to die. In fact, she wants her daughter to kill her through assisted suicide. Lyall writes, As it happens, I have a big dose of morphine right here in the house. I also have some hefty doses of codeine, Ambien, Haldol, and Ativan that I've cunningly stockpiled from the hospice service, like a squirrel hoarding for winter. Lyle writes about her internal struggle and the guilt she faced as she watched her mother suffer with cancer and strategized her assisted suicide technique. This article was absolutely heartbreaking to read, as it gives us a glimpse into the suffering at the end of life. My heart goes out to writer Sarah Lyle and her family. Though this op-ed tries to make the case for assisted suicide, it ends up making the case against it. Here's why. For one, Lyle admits she's stockpiling drugs to kill her mother, enough to, quote, kill her and several passersby, she writes. This is an argument against the legalization of assisted suicide. Homes would house dangerous drugs that anyone could take, and it's possible they could be forced onto someone ill against their will. Another detail is you can grasp the writer's mental anguish of carrying out assisted suicide. She is racked with guilt, and there's a reason why. A child should never have to decide when to kill their parents. The very fact there's a struggle to commit assisted suicide speaks to its inherently wrong nature. Especially this week, as we mark World Suicide Prevention Day, let us as Catholics speak up for the dignity of each life, even life amidst suffering. Remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death. Follow this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com. Tell your senators to confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. Pregnancy is a joyful time for families, but sometimes the joyful anticipation turns into sorrow. Miscarriage is a hidden cross, what one mother we interviewed called part of a sad sisterhood. For this week's Pro-Life Focus, we introduced you to a group offering guidance along the path to healing.
I vividly remember that first day just being very wrought with emotion and upset.
When a woman learns she's pregnant, she dreams of meeting her unborn child face to face, but she never dreams of this.
We were expecting our third child, and it was an unexpected finding in our doctor's appointment, my 16-week doctor's appointment. I was 4 months along, and the technician couldn't find a heartbeat, and then the doctor came in, and neither he could find a heartbeat either.
Colleen Sullivan shares after she and her husband learned she would deliver their miscarried baby, panic washed over them.
And then I woke up the next day and I thought, how are we going to bury our child? How are we going to get the remains of our child to bury? Where are we going to bury our child? Where do I start?
Burying a baby was something the Sullivans didn't prepare for. Like other families who experience miscarriage, they were building a crib, not a casket. It was at this critical and vulnerable time a new apostolate entered into the Sullivans' lives.
I begged God, I prayed my entire life that I would never have to bury a baby. And I feel like the Lord said, okay, then you can bury hundreds of babies.
Cara Palladino is the founder and program director of A Mom's Peace, an apostolate serving mothers of miscarried and stillborn souls. The group was founded after Palladino's own encounter with loss.
When I was expecting my 7th child, I learned that the baby had died. And when my husband and I went out to inter that baby, we came across these costs that were just beyond what we could even fathom.
She experienced firsthand the many questions families face immediately after losing an unborn child, ones that many parishes and parents cannot answer.
I usually will get a phone call, more often from a dad than a mom, because he's trying to care for her and the family, and he doesn't know what to do either.
A Mom's Peace, which is completely volunteer run, helps families at no cost put together a proper burial for their baby, one that reflects the dignity of the unborn child's life. 4 years after Palladino launched the apostolate, we meet at one cemetery where they've helped roughly 100 babies be laid to rest. The amount of lost lives speaks to the great need for a mom's peace.
It is very much a silent suffering. It's like a secret sister lost club.
A good friend of mine kind of mentioned this as the sad sisterhood that you join when you lose a child. And it was a beautiful way for me to see that there's really a network that's building and that can help each other to grieve together and to heal together.
Deacon Gerard Marie Anthony also serves with the Mom's Peace to help with the burial services and to provide spiritual support.
Amen.
These Catholic mothers underwent both a testing and strengthening of faith throughout their miscarriage journeys.
The journey with God has been hard. It's built a lot of more trust. And after first losing our son Gabriel in 2015, I kept feeling my heartstrings in prayer being just told, trust me, just trust me. That was very difficult to do. Because we then had 2 additional losses. Being asked to trust in a very real way, knowing that as a Catholic it's very important us to be open to life and wanting to have more kids. But as Kara has told me beautifully, and which I hold on to and know, when you're open to life, you're open to loss.
You have to get up every day and give it to Mary. And Mary knows what you're going through because Mary lost a son.
Nearly 3 years since her first miscarriage, Colleen Palladino says she has found peace, and that's why she now gives back as a volunteer with the group.
There are many of us who want to help in different capacities, whether that's, helping you to get the remains of your child to bury, whether that's coaching you through the grief that comes afterwards, whether that's praying with you, and being part of this sad sisterhood.
Though a Mom's Peace serves this sad sisterhood, the founder of the group says her hope is to ultimately serve our Father.
I don't do this in my name. I do this for God. I do this in the name of the church. I do this for the mother who needs the help. I do this for my sister in Christ.
To find out more about this apostolate or to volunteer for them, go to amomspeace.org. That'll do it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, but I'd love to hear from you before next week. Email me at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com or like my public page on Facebook so we can keep this pro-life conversation going. Remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.